And good afternoon, and this is Mjfontaine. It's been a couple of weeks of no podcast, or about 2 weeks now, and we are now moving into June. And this week it is episode 14, and this episode is called Childless. So, leading on to what's your story from the last podcast, which was on the 13th, we're actually going to talk about being childless, not having children, being child free. It just depends. What sparked me off to actually post this was talking about one story, also seeing the amount of conversations that are coming up for different women around childlessness or being childless. What we tend to see in our social media is a lot of people posting, about their beautiful children and being pregnant, and it's, celebrating breastfeeding, children, homeschooling. So this is, it's the best time more than ever to be a mother, because there's so many, although there's a lot of discrimination in terms of where people can breastfeed, or single parents, or people, having children. I still think in terms of celebrating motherhood, we couldn't live in a better time, because a woman is really celebrated via social media. Maybe in the workplace is a lot more different, because I know that some companies are still not employing or still using covert forms of discrimination not to consider applicants with very young children. So that can be a really big problem for some people. So when I looked at some statistics, and I had them up, and it said about 40% of women are not going to have children, and predictions, about 40%. I'm not sure the percentage for black women. I would think that it's gonna be considerably high, over the age of 40. I think especially in black culture, someone has a baby, it's going to be more than likely, 35 to 40. I think because of the problem with fibroids that a lot of black women are having, it's making it a lot more harder to actually conceive as well. So when we look at that, we look at what's the consideration. So I've looked at several articles, and again I'll put a link around them in the comments or in the information regarding this podcast. But there's several factors that can happen. Firstly, it could be medical conditions, which is the highest. More than likely, it could be fibroids, endometriosis. Is one of the main causes for a lot of women, especially black women, if they haven't had their children before. So obviously some people have had their children much earlier than when they've been diagnosed with fibroids. So it's actually not been a problem. But I do know a considerable amount of people that have been unable to do this. So medical conditions, cysts on the ovaries. That's what happened to me, but it was a combination of cysts on the ovaries and not being in a specific relationship that I thought could have supported me bringing a child into this world and the pregnancy, because I'm going to cover that in a moment, how important it is to have a really clear mindset when you are carrying a child. So the first thing is medical. which I like to say. And again, more black women tend to suffer from fibroids, and more black women are more likely, between 40 and 60%, more likely to have surgery, hysterectomies, which is really, really concerning and alarming. Because it kind of shouts loudly that if you are going to become pregnant and you're heading towards your 40s, you're a black woman, you really need to have a proper gynecological checkup to see what's happening to your uterus and work with a lot of the complementary holistic techniques available. I had a cyst on my ovaries. I did not need to have surgery to remove it. I had a small fibroid that didn't develop, and I'm past childbearing age anyway. But by the time I found out, it was, like I said, a combination of several things. But it was, how would you say? It was, I would say, too late and not too late, because if it happens in divine time, if it happens for a reason. But if you are below 40 and you're creeping towards 40, really make sure you get that done, because what you don't want to have in your 40s is to be having, which is really, it's a time of woman's life when that tends to be diagnosed, is to be getting treatment for fibroids, or really having heavy periods and being hormonally not in a place to conceive mentally, because that's really important as well. So get your healing done now. And it does require mind, body, spiritual program. You can't treat one without the other, because the fibroids will come back, which I'll get into. So the second one is finances. Now we know most women, and it does across the board, black or white, financially it's really hard for people to actually get a property, buy a property, settle down, and to be able to afford a child. The times we're living, it's really, really challenging. So that is really, really a major concern. So by the time people are getting into their 40s, it's get to 40, 45. It's just too late in terms of their fertility, which would drop considerably. It's not impossible, but that just impact and the stress of trying to fall pregnant and navigate life, it can be really, really difficult. So finances, and one thing my sister-in-law said years ago is that you're never ready financially for a child. So, you're never ready to have a child. So there's never a right time to have a child if you really want a child. And if you can have a child, you're in a partnership. It's never going to be a good time for some people. But I will say that she lived in a time and had her children in a time where you were able to get housing for your children, and it was an assured tenancy, which was, you had that tenancy forever. For a lot of people these days, they're in private rented accommodation. They're getting, obviously, their rent paid and things like that. But after a while, the landlord wants the property back, so it's really destabilising. So it's a different story. Food is more expensive now. There was a lot of perks that people would get, and if you are in a partnership and if you are married, then you're not going to get the support if you wasn't. So the difference then, you had a lot more. It's really, really challenging, I would say, for people to have a child. You really have to be resourceful. You really have to have a good network around you, and there's loads of support these days, but I think that's one of the main things that are stopping a lot of people in my research. The third one is that you can't find a suitable partner. So there's always a debate. I know a few women that have got just gone and got pregnant. They've got children. A few of them are happy. And there's about 3 people I know that have just done that, and they've had a lot of challenges with their children. I didn't want to do that, especially if I was going to have a boy child, because I didn't want to compound the situation or add to the situation of a young black boy in this society. Now, if it had happened, that's not a problem. But three women I know that just did that, and they raised their boys alone. And there's many mothers that have raised children on their own, boys on their own. They've done an amazing job, and they didn't ask to be put in that situation. But there's three women I do know that just wasn't ready to even, they didn't really integrate into society themselves. And they've had three children, and they've all been boy children, funny enough. And they've not gone and done their research in terms of who can help them. And also they're not willing to travel. And when I say this, I mean, I do believe to a certain age a woman can't raise a man. Not everybody has the support. I remember having a really on point sister friend, and she had two boys, and she just didn't know what to do with them. And I remember I was at Adornment, a hair show at the time, and I remember picking up a leaflet for Origin. I hope I've said it right. Run by Pablo Reed, and I remember saying to her, "Go to this place because they mentor young men. They put young men through rites of passage. You do not have to do this on your own." And she was in South London, but I knew people in East London that would travel to bring their child there. And she came back and she said, "Marilyn, thank you so much, because this has really made life so meaningful to my two boys." And she actually helps there now. But her boys have graduated from the rites of passage, and it's really shaped them as young men. There's also 100 Black Men for mentoring. There's also Boyhood to Manhood. I'm not sure if they're the same thing, but there's several different organisations if you do have a child. But unfortunately, the other women I know that just went and had a child, they didn't have this type of support even within their family. So they're raising boys on their own and really struggling in terms of, I just wanted to have a child, and it's really impacted the relationship with the child. I just didn't think it was fair. But there's a lot of women that do it, and they're just amazing. And I think that's an option with people, but I think a lot of people these days, again, financially, they just don't have that support, and they just don't feel they have the confidence. And I do believe it's down to a lot of our communities breaking down and a lot of the resources being withdrawn that used to really help single mothers. I've always worked with a lot of single mothers and social enterprise, social adult education, where we've worked with family learning. So there's always been places that mother and babies can go. So if any of you know any places, I can just post it again. And another one is that some women just don't want children. And it's really interesting because I couldn't see myself without children, and not having children, childless, over 45. I've made peace with that because I have so much nieces and nephews. I have godchildren. I have a lot of children. I have adopted millennials. I don't know where they've come from. So the universe has really blessed me. That's not to say I didn't go through the period of grief, but thankfully I had my art. I was able to work with so many people, and I know my purpose here is much bigger than just having biological children. It's about being a mother to a lot of people, young people, and I have had a lot of young people in my life. I've also supported and helped raise my nephew when he lived with us, so I know about raising a child from the household. And my goddaughter said one thing, Lauren, it takes a village, and I've been raised by a village. That's what she said to me, and it's just such a wise wisdom for a young person of 18, 17 at the time, to come out with. So it seems all brilliant now, and I know some of you just want to have a child, but at the other side of it, there are so much children that needs adopting and fostering in their lives, and don't rule that out if you really want to be a mother, and I believe every single woman, well, most women, is their desire is to create or procreate, and that mostly is to do with another human being. It could be mentoring, or it could be a project. But it's a cycle. We're born into a community, a society, and we contribute to that society and we give back. And that's through the act of nurturing. And it could be biologically or not, but we're still going to nurture. We're still going to nurture something and someone. If we're not able to do that, then life can be really barren. And that's, for me, the real meaning of being barren. But there's some women that just don't have that instinct, and they just do not want to have a children. They want to focus on their career and have other stuff to do. And when we look at the women in history, Rosa Parks, Sojourner Truth, I think I might be wrong. I need to check my sources. They didn't have children. A lot of Oprah, really a lot of people have not had children that have gone on to do amazing things, and we cannot condone people because they don't want children. We may not be able to understand that. They may not, understand through their map of the world, why does this person not want children? But I don't think we can really beat down somebody because they have no desire to have children. And I think that's a thing where women, we really could be quite damaging to each other, because children are a blessing in a community, but when the community is under siege, then we need as much people that are going to contribute to making that society better. Not everybody is meant to be a parent, and that's evident in the number of parents that are abusing their children and really disrespecting their children. Children don't ask to be born, but I still think the best thing we can do for children is to help create an environment where they're totally 100% supported, because it never goes away, the pain. We're always going to be working on something from our childhood, and we don't need to contribute to that. And that's one thing I was really sure about, that if I wasn't in a sufficient relationship, it wasn't about the finances. I do not give a toss about finances. I'd always make it work. But if I wasn't in a supportive relationship or a supportive place, I was not going to bring a child into this world. Because I didn't want to be responsible for another human being spending the next 20, 30 years of their life trying to work out the issues that they had with me, or their father, or the lack of father. I didn't want to contribute that. I knew that from a very young age. So for me, I really wanted it to be in a situation which was supportive and stable. And most people start off with that and then they end up divorcing. That's really unfortunate, but the intention is there. It's like if you're seeding a business or a project. If your intention is there, then no matter what you do, no matter what happens to that project, you started with that clean intention, and that's a fundamental of creation. So where do we go from here? Because there are a lot of people that really want children and they don't know if they're going to have. I'm seeing a lot of clients that are in the place of emotionally, they're not ready for children because they're working things through. I think that's a beautiful place to start. But there is this thing about fibroids and cysts and endometriosis, the hormonal imbalances. And it's really key to point out that these imbalances are related to the endocrine system. And the endocrine system is to do with our hormones. It's also part of our pituitary gland and thymus gland, parathyroid, and our pineal gland, as well as ovaries and testes. But they're all directly related to stress. Our lives are meant to be easier in the 21st century, but we're under considerable amount of stress. And this is why the wellness industry has grown. But a lot of times, especially when we're dealing with fibroids, we have to work on the place where our emotions, what have we inherited from our families, what is impacting on our body, because the stress response is an inner dialogue where where mentally your body's under stress. Stress is, there's physical stress, yeah, when we work out, but there's the stress that impacts the hormones on such a strong level, to knock out the endocrine system, is a combination of that fight or flight, is that inner dialogue. So the language of the words we speak to ourselves, the words that are spoken to us, our place in society, is all going to impact us. Because if we feel threatened as human beings, and if we feel inadequate as human beings, if we feel on some level of failure, or we don't compare to other people, then our internal mechanism is going to constantly be depressed. If we're not seen as human beings, and we are, racism, sexism, all the isms are increasingly getting worse. So all these things are going to impact on us, how we move forward in life. And those are the things that have to be addressed. How we're seen, how we're treated, how we are as a human being. Because if, one thing the body does, our body's an amazing computer. When it's under severe stress, all the energy that should be going to other areas to feed our hormones and, our skin, our hair, is going to feed the stress response, because we're constantly under stress. So the blood needs to go to the place where we're either going to fight or flight. So if we are fighting on a day-to-day basis in the workplace, or with our spouse, or with family, or with friends, if we're constantly fighting, and it's more really to do with work, our place in the world, then we're not going to have healthy cells or healthy environment which to feed our creative center, which is our wombs. So fibroids, and a lot of the times this happens from teenage years upwards. So all we do is cover up that pain. We make a cyst, we make a tumor, we make a fibroid. And with the hormone system not working, we can't heal. So all the other stuff like the journaling and all the other things are really important, but it's a combination of things what we need. We need a combination of holistic therapy. We need a combination of emotional therapy. We need a combination of diet. They all work together as one whole cycle. But we just need to understand that the way we are living our lives are going to impact us. If you're in a job or you don't know where you're going in the workplace, and you're just on that treadmill, and you really don't have, you're hoping to save money so you can buy a house and you can have children and get married, you're going to have to kind of reconsider that. You're going to have to reconsider maybe moving out of London to have your dream, because the amount of work and effort and emotional energy you need to sustain a mortgage in London, if you can afford it, 2 or 3 jobs, is not worth it. So again, the people have to consider their living choices. What happens when you have a child? How much it's going to cost for nursery? So again, it's that business that you wanted to start. Maybe now is the time to start getting it together. Sounds crazy, but when you're on less income, there's other ways that you can make money. Working part-time, having 2 jobs, instead of maybe 1 full-time job. That's again just as tiring, but there's a point of my madness where one of the jobs will be something you really enjoy, your own work, that's going to help keep your stress level down. It's going to make you fitter, it's going to make you lose weight, it's going to make you function properly. Emotionally, though you'll be busy, you'll still be able to manage. And this is how I was able to work with my body. I found out much later on in life, because this is something I had to learn. So looking at different ways to work, so you can lessen that stress, because that is the main cause, is the stress. So these things are really important for you if you want to start family. There's some people that have got really terrible fibroids or endometriosis. I know a lot of people have had babies with both conditions, and I know some people who haven't. It's really looking at what's out there, the information. Don't put your head in the clouds. Don't just look at surgery. Some cases, surgery needs to happen because the fibroids are just too large and too painful. But in more cases than not, when fibroids are removed, they're more likely to grow back because the condition that created them has not been dealt with. So unless there's a key health plan in terms of that, then it's not going to get any better. So it's really looking at that. Some people not had children and they're going for that mourning of being without children and fitting themselves in society. Developing a practice of self-care is really important for you to really just go through the grieving process and come out at the end. It's really important to acknowledge that you are grieving. But also, I want to say that you're no less of a woman because you don't have children. Because like I said again, mothering does not stop biologically, and couldn't get my head around that before. I used to think, no way, I need to have that belly, that beautiful bump, and to feel that. No, you can still have unconditional love for other human beings. There is fostering, there is adoption. I know a lot of people that do that. But I think the most important thing is the grief, is actually going through the grief, and you're not going to die. Most of you, I can't speak for everybody because, again, that feeling of grief when you haven't got children, the pain is unbearable, but you come out at the end. But then I've heard stories where some people have just felt really low, they've just not been able to go on. But I think is relative to each individual, and I do think that getting support, emotional support, talking about that with somebody is invaluable. You're not a freak, you're not an alien. You've gone through a situation, but you never, as long as you're a woman, you never stop mothering on some level. Let me know how you guys find this podcast. I really think it's important that this was discussed. I saw an article, and I think it was one of the articles. I saw an essence that was actually talking about Paul Ashanti, the singer who's childless and single at 40. That's nothing. And people are saying, what's wrong with her? She's actually a representative of 40%, maybe 60% of women that age. Think about that. The whole area around dating, children, there's a lot of men that are childless, especially black men. So what is happening in our society? I think we need to start honest dialogues instead of rock throwing. I think we need to start making a concerted effort. There's more and more women that are starting businesses, and a lot of them do not have children because, they need to concentrate on their business. So they're hoping that they meet somebody, so they are taking active steps. But I don't think rock throwing and saying because somebody's 40 that they've missed the game. Janet Jackson, let's just think about that. Janet Jackson, yes, she has money, but people buy Louis Vuitton bags and luggage that cost thousands, so there's always going to be somebody that can help someone. And I've got a client that's got a really beautiful fertility story, and hopefully I can interview her and she can talk about her own journey through infertility and coming out and having 2 beautiful children. So I leave you with that blossom of hope, knowing that there is a way. It's more the economical, emotional and physical impacts that one has to consider when becoming a mother or having children or choosing not to have children. Mjfontaine, signing off. Again, you can support this podcast on my Patreon. And don't forget to sign up or follow me on Facebook, Mjfontaine UK. I've got my art site on Facebook, Marilyn Fontaine Art as well, or Instagram, which is Mjfontaine. Until next week, bye for now.